Hello ladies and gentlemen, I am Roy Potter, and today when I'm recording this is the 26th of August 2019. Now, I've had a few requests on my DMs on my Twitter and from a couple of other places to address the situation in Genesis 1:26 and 1:27. They actually asked for 1:27. And they wanted me to do it from the Hebrew so that, they could get a different, or at least a better understanding of what's going on. Pardon me just a second here. The morning coffee, all that business. By the way, I'm in the studio this morning, but it doesn't lend itself to this type of thing. I really would like to have a huge blackboard or whiteboard where I could show you the flow of what I'm going to present to this morning. Or today for you. But unfortunately, we have to make do with what we have. So I apologize for how this is going to unroll or unravel, but I would hope that you find it interesting. Now, those of you who don't want to look at our existence here as anything to do with a God, a spiritual thing, and especially if you're not interested in the Hebrew scriptures, I'm not saying you want to move along and not pay attention, because what's happening in the world today, this assault by satanic, I'm going to say Luciferian sources, that's not the right word, as most of you know who have followed me, but you get the idea. This evil thing that's happening in the world, this assault on mankind, especially the assault on the sexes and their relationship and their sociology and all of that. The multitudinous sexual preferences and references now, which are all designed to change language and destroy our relationships and our understanding of who and what we are. I've talked about all of that in the past, and that's nothing new. But that's why I decided to do this today with this request. Another reason was because Stefan Molyneux, I believe it was yesterday, and I did see it, put up a very good video on that evil Satan is not hidden. He brought up that old statement, well, the greatest thing that Satan's ever done is convinced everybody he doesn't exist. And Stefan's point was no, it's out for everybody to see. But I understand the people that say that. They're saying that this evil that we're seeing is not because of Satan or because it's bad, but because that's the way we need to go. You see, or that's the way the progressives, the politically correct, the satanic people say that we need to go that way, and they don't hide that it could possibly be an evil entity or evil in itself, if I'm making sense there. So the point is that evil is assaulting us today. Go watch that. It's about an hour presentation from Stefan Molyneux on the devil is not hidden. But at the same time, I can understand those who say that he is. The point is that there is this assault against mankind, and it really is designed to destroy us. And what we're seeing today in this progressive business isn't progressive at all. This is regression back to a time when we didn't have a consciousness and we didn't understand who and what we are, and there were forces at work to prevent us from doing so. As a matter of fact, when Homer was writing his Iliad and the Odyssey, it was actually a story about the awakening of mankind to a consciousness, not just an awareness, but a consciousness. And in fact, the Torah, the Old Testament, the first 5 books of the Bible, are really the same thing at the same time period. So this was a thing that was happening across the world in several different places, which is very important to understand what's happening now. 2001, A Space Odyssey. If any of you have watched any of the things about how Kubrick made that, or if you've heard Alex Jones talk about what it means and all of that, it is talking about the progression of evolution. Now, I don't believe that monkeys became men, but I do believe that we have had an awakening, so to speak, a consciousness evolution of what's important. For instance, the real relationship between men and women, and again, why that's being attacked by these satanic evil influences, Marxism, etc., to destroy that relationship, because it will destroy mankind. But in 2001, the final step before man entered into his fully awakened state, so to speak, was this computer age, and computers running us and being not just our source of information, but everything we look to. And as you've heard me talk about before, this AI structure that we're seeing, and those in Silicon Valley have even said, we're going to worship this AI God, which is a creation of our own hands. In other words, we're the creators, but we're going to worship this thing, is really what it's come down to. Well, in the Old Testament, it talks about, and I'm going to get to this just a little bit. I'm not going to get into it a whole lot, but this is preparatory for what I'm going to talk about. I believe that Alex Jones is right, what he was saying, that we're waiting to step up to the next level. Stanley Kubrick, even though I don't fully, well, I know why he made 2001 the way he did, I think, to try to appeal to a lot of different people. But at any rate, the storyline's good, so I'll just leave it at that. There is going to be this next jump in our consciousness. We're not going to change. Life and death will still be here, but we'll understand it differently than we do now, and eventually overcome the death part, I personally believe. But this thing with the machine taking over, this computer taking over and making gods of us, to look at it that way is wrong, and of course that's how the Silicon people look at it. Well, this next jump will be when we put this aside and we reconnect ourselves, our souls, our whole being, but particularly our cerebral cortex, our brain, that area, back to God, our pituitary, our those particular connections that give us our emotions and those types of things. Our heart is really part of all that too. So our hearts and minds are connected, and we're going to come to a place where we're back connected to God. And we're not going to need computers. We're not going to need this stuff. We're going to come right from the source. That's the way I look at it. Now, in the Old Testament, there's a thing called Urim and Thummim. Urim means lights. Thummim is how we pronounce it, means perfection. So this was something that was put on the high priest's ephod, his chest plate, so that he could mounted there so that he could interpret things, see things. Well, we and our sphere of existence is going to become a united Urim and Thummim according to everything that's talked about in the scriptures. I'd like to go back to some writings back in the 1800s when there was this war between the different Masonic sects, SECTS, divisions, and what they were teaching and what they were trying to accomplish. There were good ones, and they were trying to set the stage for what mankind should become, and you can see the evil side interfering with that and trying to stop it. It really is happening. And we need, as I've said before, this divide will define us, and if you don't really earn it from God. He's going to put you there regardless, depending upon, however he wants to judge it. And I am using the word he. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But basically the divide is something we need to embrace, as I made 2 videos on now, I think. And that's because it will define who we are. And that's necessary because of the injection of bad DNA into the human race back many, many thousands of years ago. So let's jump into this, and you'll notice, as always, I was able to write this up here previously, so it's a little better script than I usually do. But as I add words, it may not be as good, so please forgive me, but I will tell you what they are, and we'll go from there. So this question that I received from on my DM from an individual is, why is it that Genesis 1:27, it looks like it was changed? So I understand it was changed thousands of years ago. Pardon me as I reach out of screen here. Let me read this to you. Now again, you people that don't want to hear scripture and all that, that's fine. You can go away if you want. But you have to understand how this impacts the world today, because the forces that are of evil and good that are at each other's throats right now, or should be, at least the good should be reacting to this, they go by the same script, ladies and gentlemen. They go by this thing. They both do. And if you don't know your enemy, you can't combat them. So I'm trying to show you what's happening in the world today, especially in this initial, right from the get-go, this initial assault on the sexes. Okay? Now I'm going to allude to some things during this because I don't think I can actually put the information out. And as I've told you, at this point, I haven't even decided what to title this video yet. because of a lot of different reasons. But I'll come up with one by the time I get it uploaded. So the question that came out was this, and let me read 27 and you'll see what he said. He said, in Genesis 27 it says, so God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them. And he says, now I understand that this was changed, that it actually used to say that God created man in our image. Well, first of all, you just got to back up a verse. The gentleman who asked me that. Let me read verse 26. And God said, let us, plural, make man in our image after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, etc., etc. And then verse 27. So God created man in his own image. All right? And what is that? Male and female. And by the way, in verse 27, the word that's used there is selem, and it's used twice in both places. So God created man in his own image, selem. In the image, selem, of God created he them. It's two witnesses. So we're being told not just our feelings, not just our spiritual makeup, not just our psychology, not just, no. We are in the image, the literal image of God. Imperfect, but in a literal image of what God actually is. And that's what's been attempted to be destroyed, because we think that our forebears, our ancient fathers and mothers were dumb, stupid, they didn't know anything, when very likely they were closer in a lot of ways to the source than we are today. The closer you get to the source of a spring, the more pure it is. Well, that's kind of the same thing. I'm not saying that the intelligence and the information wasn't lost and that we're regaining it, of course. Yes, but we think these ancients were stupid, and they were not. Isaiah says, the ancient, he is the head, and the prophet that telleth lies, he is the tail. So at any rate, let me show you a little bit about what's going on here, and I'm going to start off here. Yes, we are God's progeny, and I'm going to say it that way. I'm not saying that there isn't an intelligence that permeates everything, that's everywhere. God, the way a lot of people envision God, and that it can't be a corporeal individual. But I will say this, that God created someone, something in the Hebrew other writings. It talks about the Adam Kadmon, and that's the first man, the perfect man, who Jesus is basically being defined by. And it was a male and a female. It was great. It wasn't male and female traits in us in one person. No, that's not what it said. It's two individuals coming from the same source, but two individuals, male and female. And I think you're going to find this fascinating, because there's some real revelations here. Again, if you don't believe the scriptures, if you're not spiritual, that's fine. Don't misunderstand what I'm doing here. For those who do want to see this, this is adult information, okay? This is adult material, and you'll want to treat it that way. And what do I mean by that? Well, you'll see. You may not want the kids to watch this, okay? Depending upon their age and where they are when they're ready to hear this. When you have the mom and daughter talk and the father-son talk, when they reach puberty, that thing just before. But at any rate, we're going to get into it that deep, okay? And this may take some time, and I apologize, but I just feel it's that important, because we're forgetting who we are. All these genders popping up, people claiming other things, even to be animals and all that. This is destroying us, and we can't let it do that. We do have to stop it. We do have to stop it. And we have a right to. More of a right than they have to push their stupidity and their destruction upon us. So I'm going to begin here. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. In fact, the word for God is Elohim, which is right there, and it's plural. It's actually gods. Now, those who have a problem with, the monotheism versus polytheism and all that, and trying to distinguish, they'll just say that, well, God, Ezra and God, when Ezra, by the way, is the guy who redacted the Old Testament, who brought everything together. There was a conflict between the Elohists and the Yahwists, and again, some of this you're not going to quite understand, but there were reconciliations. There were agreements made in the way the scriptures were put together. Let me put it that way. we're not saying that the truth is challenged. That's not the point, okay? But Ezra, basically it means head man of truth is what it means. A man representing God, Ezra, almost that kind of a thing. And it probably wasn't his real name. It's basically, I think, defining what he did. We think we know who Ezra was, but I don't want to go there. But the point is that Elohim means gods. It's plural. I mean, I'm sorry, that's just the way it is in the Hebrew. And you can say that the Jews and other people they use the plural to make God bigger and all that, but there are other ways to do that. No, I'm afraid that's what this means. Now it says, as it goes on down in Genesis 1, that God made... Well, let me just read it to you. I think that's the best thing to do. Okay, we'll do that again. So it says, so God created man in his own image, in the image of... And this is in Genesis 1, by the way. I'll just go forward here. Genesis 1. So God's made man. Well, guess what the word for man is? Adam, men. And what does it say here? God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them. Adam is male and female. And I don't mean in one person. I don't mean male and female attributes. I mean that this is a duality. This is two people. This is two individuals. Adam, two. Just like when he said, let us make man in our likeness. Let us make man in our likeness. He does. Adam is the human race, male and female. That's really what this means. So that first couple, they were called Adam. What did I say a few minutes ago? The Adam Kadmon. All right. And I'm going to show you all this here in just a few minutes. And then this is very important because the first chapter of Genesis really isn't the earthly creation as we know it, the mortal creation. Mortal creation happens after the fall. But anyway. And God blessed them, and God said unto them, in this state, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth and subdue it. So they were able to have, what? What have I said in a long time? These angels, these beings in the spirit world, what we define as the spirit world, were men and women. They were. Male and female at this point. The men and women has a slightly different connotation later, as I'll show you as we go along. Now, a lot of people are going to get upset about this. You know, sex is a bad thing. Oh, it was a thing that killed off our immortality because Adam and Eve had sex and then, you know, God got upset at them. No, it was designed that way from the beginning. So Adam is actually male and female. Not in one person. That's an apostasy. That's a mistake, even a heresy. Okay? Now, the word for image... Like I said just a few minutes ago, God said he created man in his image, male and female. That's Zelem. That's right there. Okay? Remember I've told you about Notarikon, that you can understand more about the words by taking the letters and understanding their original definitions. Okay? Adam, for instance, means, when you break it down to its lowest common denominator, it means God through a door to the water. In other words, God enters through a door to an existence, into what we might want to say is the earth, for instance, because this is water, right? But water has different meanings in Scripture. But that's basically what it means. It means going through a door. Okay? He was somewhere before, and he traversed through a door and came to a different place. Zelem is the image. And this is interesting too, because what does it mean by image? Okay, well, let's break it down in this word. Zayin, this right here is a righteous man. Okay? A righteous man, a priest. I think that's the best way to put it, a righteous man. It's the first word in Zedek, okay, which is the same thing. Lamed, again, the flail, forcing, whatever. Mem, water. What is that saying? Zelem, the image is that it's a righteous person, a righteous man, is actually forcing into the water. Okay? In other words, it's the same. It's repeating this image that Adam is in the image of God. It's a dual. Twice it says that. So it's saying, this was something that God did. Lamed, he performed, he did. The righteousness did this thing. So it's even more important to understand that this whole story has some very deep meanings about who and what we are. So let's start there. I'm going to stop this so I can prepare the next plate here so that you can see the next flow. And I'm sorry, I wish I could just go from one spot on the board to another, but that's not possible. So let's go ahead and do this now, okay? Next step. Okay, and then there's this situation here, continuing on with the fact that the male and female is actually shown in God's name. And there are a lot of other things too, but at the very beginning of this video, I showed you the word Elohim, which means the gods. And then, of course, there's the four-letter tetragrammaton that I've talked about many times, how many things can be actually gotten out of this word. You know it as Jehovah, Yahweh, YHVH, because it's Yod, He, Vav, He, Waw, He. Male and females in both of these. Yes. And this one shows that there are many of them. There's God. There's the male right there, the bull. There's the female, He. Now they're not connected here. Actually, it's saying something else. It's talking about this Lamed situation, which is very interesting. Because, the short name for God is El, right? Aleph, Lamed. Elohim is the plural. But when we talk about the gods, we're talking about male and female, and it's right in the word. The same thing happens in Yahweh, Jehovah, if you will. Here's the male, female, female, and there are other things that you can basically distill out of these two words, especially this one, to give you all kinds of more information, which we're not going to do today. But I wanted to, again, show you that this male-female thing is critical, is central to who and what we are in our understanding of God and what's happening in the world to destroy the male-female relationship. Satan wants to do that. The evil wants to do that. They imitate a lot of what we do. They have sacred sex, but not for the same reasons you do. Well, some of the same reasons, but not all of them. They have sexual parties. They have degenerate, debased type things to debase the sexes. It's not for building relationships and worlds and progeny. It's for the immediate pleasure and to degrade it and in the end to destroy it. Let's move along. Okay, we're back, and you can see that I've changed the words up here on the whiteboard. Now this is where it's going to get kind of into adult material, okay? Just so you know. There's a misunderstanding about when Jesus said, in the resurrection, that neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are as the angels in heaven. And also when he's purported to have said that there are, in the resurrection, there is no male and female. We can get on to that subject later, but it actually had to do with recognitions under the law in the perfect state. That's really what it had to do about. And also about those who don't conduct themselves accordingly here and are denied being in the image of God later, okay? Believe me, in the image of God includes being divided into male and female, being a man or a woman, okay? It has something to do with the sexes. Well, you don't have to believe me, but anyway, that's my entire understanding of this and why we're being assaulted the way we are. Okay, so it's interesting that when they're first created, God calls them male and female. He doesn't say man and woman, male and female. I'm going to get to what the Hebrew words for man and woman are. They're basically the same thing as husband and wife, actually. And of course, Adam can mean man too. But this is what really starts to grab, and we start to understand what this is that God is. okay, and why we are in the same image. As a matter of fact, most of creation, now, at the upper levels of our existence, like mammals and especially mankind, fall in these categories, okay? What is a male? You'll hear some dogs whining in the background. Must be some sirens going off. Okay, the word for male used in Genesis 26 and 27, 1, 26, 27, is Zokar, and it's Zayin Kaf Resh. Now, the Zayin is a sword. It penetrates. You got that concept in your mind? I think you know where I'm going with that. So right off the bat, the scriptures, God identifies the male as having this. It's a phallus. It's another shorthand. I've talked about shorthand in Hebrew when you can't spell a word out, but you use a symbol. Zayin is a sword or a phallus. Female. The word for female used in Genesis 26, 1, 26, and 27 is right here. And this is interesting. It's Nikeba. Female. Are you all ready for this? Nun, Kof, Beit, Hey. What does it mean? Well, it comes from the word Naqab, slightly different pronunciation, but this is what comes from Naqab. And Naqab means, again, you ready for this? It means puncture, perforate, penetration, with holes. This is not horrible pornographic information. This is beautiful. This shows the continuation of what is supposed to be the most beautiful thing in life, in existence. So female, and we can break this down. Nun, remember I told you about as a winged speedy messenger. In other words, what happened to Mary? Holy Ghost fell upon her and she was filled with the Holy Ghost and conceived. Spirit of God. Kof, in this sense, it usually means back of the head, but in the sense of caring like a shepherd's crook. In other words, taking care of something. Bait, home. Hey, showing it's another, proving it's feminine. What this means is that the woman, when she receives the penetration by the man to have posterity, she protects, she nurtures. That's where the kof comes in here, the shepherd's crook, like a shepherd's crook to protect the sheep. What is growing in her womb, in her home? She provides a home, a safe, another way of looking at this is a safe home for the spirit. To make a soul, a man or a woman. Because God formed man out of the dust of the ground, Adam, and breathed into him his spirit, the spirit of God, and man became a living soul. So man, as we are today, we are souls. This is souls. We're spirits and bodies put together to become a soul. We are the souls. Later on in chapter 2, it talks about Adam being alone, and God wants to make a helpmeet for him. Well, now he already has a female counterpart. What are we talking about? Well, there's something happening between 1st and 2nd Genesis that I don't want to get into it right now. But basically, it's two separate creations. It's two separate compartmentalized events. Just kind of put it that way for right now. For ease of understanding, it's not the same story told twice. The first story is about the creation in the spirit world. And the second chapter is the creation on this world, this type of environment, this place. And then the fall. And really there's a reason for the fall. And this is going to be another adult conversation. But at any rate, after Adam is in the Garden of Eden, God says, well, we're going to make a helpmeet for him. So the word changes from male, this word here, to this, to actually what it says is, out of, God made man, Adam, and then out of Adam, he made a woman. Well, I've talked about prior too, and I didn't put this up here, but I showed you that, you know, when you study chromosomes and all of that, you find out that, you know, men have X and Y chromosomes. Women only have XX. So the fact of the matter is that Genesis was right. You can create a man and a woman from a man if you could take the genes out. You could make another XY, or you could take the X and make an XX. But a woman doesn't have any Y chromosomes, so she can't make a man. Isn't that interesting that they knew this? They knew this. And I've heard Alex Jones say, oh, all the embryos are female to begin with. No, they're not. No, they're not. He's mistaken about that. And he'll go through some, and I'm not calling him out on it. I'm just saying I know why he's saying that. But no, the fact of the matter is that's not the case. Okay? That event was decided at the time of conception. But at any rate. So it talks about the Isha being taken out of Adam. And there she is right there, Isha. There's that feminine ending, and you'll notice there's a space here. You see this space? Let me use a pointer. See, this is a hay, and there's a space there. And here's a hay again, and there's a space there. You get the point? This is where you can make an entry. Penetration. Isha, woman. And then it brings up the man and the woman, and the word for man that then comes into the scripture is ish, ish. There's the yod. Isn't that interesting? Yod, very similar in appearance to a sperm, and it matches up to that zayin, that sword, that phallus, and that is what's injected into the female. Yep. It's in the words, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not making this stuff up. It's in the words. I'm just kind of pointing it out, okay? All right, so we've already talked about from Adam, God made a woman. From Adam, I showed you that before, Aleph, Dalet, Mem. From that, God made a woman, Isha, okay, and brought her to the man, Ish. They become one flesh, not one person, one flesh, one body. In other words, now as above, so below. Jesus said it again, and I'm not making this about Baphomet. Jesus said, our Father who art in heaven, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. He was doing the same thing. But remember, the devil tries to imitate, just like he's imitating the computer thing now to try to imitate the mind of God and trying to get us to plug into it. Same kind of thing that's going on. Okay, so they become one body, and the word for body there is basar, and it's, I'm not going to write it up here, but it's bait shin. Again, very important, shin, because that's the fire of life. That's fire in the belly. That's the seed of mankind. That's, yeah. Jesus used the shin a lot. And then, so it's bait shin resh. And so it's basically saying that the body is the house, bait, of the spirit, shin, of the head, meaning the head God. Or, yeah, just put it that way. Okay, let me see if I want to write anything else down here. I think the rest of it I can just talk about. But I wanted you to see this so that you'd understand. The person that asked about the difference in Genesis 26 and 27. So, and to answer your question, he did say, God did say in verse 26, let us make man in our image, male and female. Okay, he did. And then later it says, God, let us make man, and God, did, made him. He made them. So it's just kind of not really shorthand, but we've already said who God is, and so just in a grand sense, the word He is used. Well, what am I saying there? Well, God said it, not me, but I'm not going to go there today. Okay. I thought I'd end on one other thing here. Now this gets pretty nasty as well, but bear with me here. In the New Testament, Jesus is talking about that, and it even says it in the Old Testament. It talks about God, for the wicked, He cuts them off that they no longer have either root or branch. Remember I said that those who defy God, especially these Luciferians that are trying to destroy sex now and what it is, they get what they're trying to force. They are going to lose it. They will be cut off from their ancestry and from their posterity. They will be left without root or branch. What does that intimate? That intimates a sexual relationship is going to be cut off. Oh, Potter, you're way off it. The Bible's much more straightforward, ladies and gentlemen, than you're willing to look at. So Jesus said, they'll cut them off neither root nor branch. He's referring to them very similarly to trees. As a matter of fact, in the Bible, trees are often, you can substitute man for trees. It's symbolic. The idea of trees is symbolic. The cedars of Lebanon, some other things. But I think I've shown you I don't want to go into too great of a detail right now, but I think you can see that trees are often referred to as men. Well, let's go back to the Garden of Eden. And if you want to tell a story, but you don't want it to be adult XXX material, how do you frame it? We often hear the Catholics and the Christians and everybody, actually, really. It seems like I pick on the Catholics, but I technically am still one. But let's just say this. They always say that the first sin, the original sin, was sex. Well, that's true, but it wasn't between Adam and Eve, the man and the woman that were put together here in this sphere for that purpose. And again, some of this is allegorical, but I think you'll see the importance of it. And if not, no big deal. I'm just putting it out there. You can study it if you want. But trees can be men. God says to Adam, He says, of everything in the garden, you can eat of all the trees, all the fruit. But of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, don't eat of that one. Don't eat of that one. What had happened? The fallen angels were here, ladies and gentlemen, or the pre-Adamites. That gets into a whole other subject. The point is, as I said the other day, and incest may have been the improper term. The point is having sex outside of the bounds that God has set. Let's put it that way. So He says, you can eat of all of the trees of the garden, all the fruit, but don't eat of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Who is He talking about? He's talking about, for lack of a better term, the fallen angels, one of the leader of the fallen angels, whatever. And the promise of good and evil is what? What did I show you the other day with the Lamed? Remember? If when you making sure that you choose righteously. The Lamed there's Nefesh, which means soul, right? And then there's Nephilim, which is kind of soulless, but it has force. It's forcing you to do things. In other words, it's forcing you to have knowledge. It's forcing you. It's a force. It's almost like a plan to make you do something. And it goes along very much with the war in heaven. So at any rate, for you adults out there, you could partake of any of the trees in the garden, but not of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Staying along the lines of the male and the female, right? I'm going to go somewhere else here real quick. Genesis 3:16. God says to the woman, this is after they've partaken of the fruit, I will greatly increase your sorrow and your conception. greatly increase. Well, that means, well, she had sorrow and conception before, but now he's going to increase it after the fall, which means that she had sorrow and conception prior to the fall. I will greatly increase your sorrow. He didn't say, I'm going to now give you sorrow and sorrow in your conception. I'm not going to give it to you now. I'm going to increase the sorrow and your conception. And then what does he say? And your desire shall be to your husband, and he shall rule over you. Her desire shall be to her husband, and he shall rule over him. Ladies and gentlemen, if you think about this, what this is saying is that there was this male-female relationship prior to the fall, even in the spirit world. It even goes back that far. The very first Adam Cadman had a male and a female individual in it. Two individuals, okay? To greatly increase your sorrow and conception means that there were children born prior to the fall. That's what that means. For how long, we don't know. Under what circumstances, pretty obvious. But there was also this mixing of the seed between the Nephilim and the Nefeshas. Us. Between the Nephils and the Nefeshas. To put it easy. And that they did in violation of God's commandment not to eat of that forbidden fruit. It's that simple. That has a lot of connotations and a lot of meaning that I don't dare get into here. So this also means that when the fallen angels came here, they came in pairs. Male and female pairs. That's what it means. So the fallen angels were with their female counterparts. In the Torah, in the Old Testament, when it gives the number for Israel, all the different tribes, it's only numbering the males. It doesn't, in the military age males normally. So it's not including the men and women. It never does. I'm sorry, the women and the children. It never does. It'll say with their women and children or whatever, but the numbers are of the men. Same in the spirit world. So when it says the fallen angels were cast out of heaven, it wasn't just these androgynous spirits. It was a male spirit that was cast out with their female counterparts. And these were God's progeny. These were God's begotten sons and daughters. The lead angel that caused this whole problem, he's a created being. He's not begotten, and I've talked about that before. But God's own sons and daughters fell for what he was selling them, much like we have people here falling for this AI God now, or for this Marxist system that they're trying to put into place. There are all kinds of things that you can deduce from that when you understand that story, you know, and Adam is a little more culpable than we're led to believe. Finally, I brought up the 2001 A Space Odyssey and talked about Stanley Kubrick's story about man's progression, and then become from and I don't believe we came from apes. That's not, but that's Kubrick's explanation. But at any rate, this evolution in consciousness, I think, is a better way to put it. And I've already talked about how we're facing the very same thing that Dave did in 2001 when Hal was trying to take over and being the big shot. The created being trying to run the man, and then the man has to overcome that, right? And that when he does, then he's born into the next level of being, into consciousness. Still men and women, but more aware, even closer to the truth. Now, some people will say, well, that was Lucifer coming back. I've heard that explanation, but that's really, I don't think, the case under the circumstances. It certainly doesn't follow the scriptural line. So I talked about the Urim and Thummim at the beginning, and I wanted to end on this. Urim means lights. Thummim means perfection. We are the lights, and we are to become perfect. Our sphere is to become a Urim and Thummim, and we will be connected to God. We won't need these things. We won't need these. Turned it on. We won't need these. We won't need computers. We'll be tuned in, connected to the grand source of all truth. And we won't have to do it with chips in our brains, because God's already placed His seed in us, His DNA in us. We've already got it. It just has to be switched on. Ladies and gentlemen, I've shown you some things today. Again, whether you believe them or not is really not my concern. My daughter once said, I think she got this from a class, but what you think of me is none of my business. Your opinion of me is none of my business. And I'm saying that too. I'm showing you something here that nobody else has talked about. Oh, don't kid yourself, in the Shivas and in the Torah classes of the Hasidim, and they talk about these things, but they don't want you to know about it. Well, I'm telling you about it. Yes, we are real, and we are eternal, and we're in a state right now to determine what side gets this physical creation. And according to the scriptures, we know who that's going to be. We know God's going to win in the end over the evil influences, over Satan, if you will. But you have to be able to take a stand willingly and knowing what you're doing. There'll be those on the right and the left, and there'll be a whole bunch in the middle that don't know what's going on. Okay? The ones, God says, I would rather you be hot or cold, but if you're in the middle, I'll spew thee out of my mouth. Okay? So you'd almost be willing to have that separation. We have to embrace it. And I could go further, but I think you see what I'm saying. To be valiant in the truth is in itself a reward. That's all I got for you today. Let me think if there's anything I wanted to say. No, that'll do it for now. Out here.